Welcome to the Scott and Holm podcast. Back here, unfortunately, at the end of another Cougar men's basketball season. A wonderful Cougar season, and we're going to talk about how it finished, and I think still a lot of stuff to be happy there. Dustin, I think we consider ourselves incredibly fortunate, lucky, whatever you want to call it, for having lived the last 6-7 years of Cougar men's basketball, the decade or so since Calvin Sampson's taken over this program. I think we're very fortunate in that regard, but oh man, it's hard not to feel snake bit if I have a third season in a row that either a good amount of the regular season or the postseason was marked by some key player suffering some degree of injury. You can be positive about the season as a whole, and I think I've been surprised at how positive Cougar fan base as a whole has been about the season that is now in the rearview mirror with men's basketball. But yeah, man, kind of a bummer in that regard.
Yeah, I think bittersweet is the word, right? It's awfully been incredibly sweet, and I wasn't even thinking about literally 5 straight Sweet 16s. I wasn't meaning to do the sweet play on words there, but I'll take it. Just that I'll talk more a little bit on that later. But I mean, what an incredible run it's been to see this team. No one does. I mean, us and Gonzaga have done that. No one else has got more than 2 in a row Sweet 16s. Usually it's been a 5. So just remarkable run. This team in particular. Just had a remarkable run of a season. It's been so much fun to watch this team. I'm so glad for the ride. But yeah, the manner in which it ended with one injury pretty clearly swinging the tide of that game it's a bitter pill to swallow, and it's going to be a bitter pill to swallow for a while still, I think.
Yeah, I think we've all, as Cougar fans, gotten to experience plenty of the beauty and the agony of March Madness. The beauty, like 5 straight Sweet 16s, like you said, nobody else other than Gonzaga is on that kind of run. I think I tweeted this a couple weeks ago. The last 2 national champions from the Big 12 have not gotten past the first weekend of the tournament since those championships, and I don't think it's because of any significant deficiency with those programs. It's just a really, really difficult, wonderful, exciting. I think we both agree the pinnacle of sports, college and pro, like March Madness, but also just like the kind of cruelty that comes with a single elimination tournament that can, be swayed by the whims of, I guess, Jamal Shead's ankle. We also have some spring sports stuff to talk about as well, reviewing a really good vibes weekend from Cougar track and field, and also bat and ball sports got plenty of exercise, and we're involved in plenty of results that we have to catch up on and talk about. But gonna mention also, there's only 2 of us this week, and again, normally I would use that to make a humorous reason as to why Bobby's not here, but it was actually his, because it is my fault Bobby is not here. I could not record on Tuesday after saying I could, and Bobby, being the selfless guy he is, wanted it to be us, the 2 OG co-hosts, talking about the last basketball game. But don't worry, Bobby will be back to talk some basketball big picture stuff and everything else going on that we'll have on next week's podcast. So gotta mention, of course, at our top here, Dustin, we have a new promo code with Charlie Hustle, our good friends and sponsors. Forget anytime, delete it from your memory bank, do the eternal sunshine and spotless mind thing on your brain of all the other ad reads I've done, because our new promo code with our friends at Charlie Hustle, the makers of incredibly comfortable vintage collegiate wearables, including a fantastic Houston Gear collection. Our new promo code where you, the listener, can save 15% off your order is POD15, PAWD 15. I figure if you've listened by now, you probably understand why we went with that one, but pod for podcast to save 15% on incredibly comfortable, a really unmatched Cougar collection out there. I am currently, for those of you watching with our new little visual setup, I am wearing the Charlie Hustle white Cougs and red lettering shirt. Fantastic. One of my go-tos. And you can yourself, like me, get plenty of Charlie Hustle in your life by going to charliehustle.com using our promo code PAWD15. I mentioned also here, while we're doing some housekeeping, our patreon.com/shpodcast to financially support what goes into a weekly Houston Cougar podcast that we have done here for going on a decade. Patreon.com/shpodcast. Of course, support our friends at the 1012 Network at TN12 Network, the 1012 podcast, and a number of great sister podcasts of other Big 12 schools. Dustin, got to lead with, I think, the big topic of the last week or so. Cougar tennis. No. Cougar men's basketball saw their season come to an end in the Sweet 16 against the Duke Blue Devils. I think I'm in a lot more of a sense of peace now than I was at Friday at about 8:30 my time, when the game, I think, roughly came to a conclusion. It just feels very unfair that this team that I think as good, if not better than any. And again, acknowledging that the 2021 team went to the Final Four, the 22 team got one round further than this team, and just that we are spoiled for very good Cougar basketball teams to choose from the last 6 years. But this team really felt like a different animal, and so I think really hurts to see I think we're going to get to this team, even without somebody as irreplaceable as Jamal Shead, came as close as they did to still keeping themselves alive in the tournament. I think a testament to them, and also, like I think you and I have said several times now, just a very bittersweet way to end this season.
Yeah, a lot of times we kind of start these by doing the game recap, and I am more at peace than I was on Friday. I still know that I have it in me. I think if you're listening to this, you probably don't need me to tell you what happened. Houston lost to Duke 54-51, with the most notable occurrence being, as you mentioned, Jamal Shead hurting his ankle in the first half, and Houston was winning by 6 at the time. They went on to lose by 3. And, you saw the way that Houston was relying on him offensively. He had scored or assisted on 4 of Houston's previous 6 buckets at the time of his injury, not to mention his, defensive impact, his overall, leadership impact, the overall morale of the team, which seemed like it took a hit with him going out. And I think it's pretty clear that Houston would have won this game by double digits if he doesn't turn his ankle. I think anybody but maybe the most dyed-in-the-wool Duke partisan watching the game, I think probably would agree with me on that if Jamal Shead is healthy, that Houston wins this game and moves on to face NC State in the Elite Eight. And the Wolfpack have looked incredible. Nothing's for certain in March, but it is indisputably true at the very least that injury cost Houston a really, really good shot at a Final Four. And it's one of those things, man. You knew from the moment it happened, from as soon as it became clear that Jamal Shead was seriously hurt, he wasn't coming back at the game. You knew, like, it's just gonna be one of the great Houston sports what ifs of our lifetimes. What if Jamal Shead hadn't turned his ankle, 13 minutes and change into the Duke game. And that's the beauty and the agony of March Madness. If it's in the middle of the Big 12 season and Jamal Shead turns his ankle and he's out for a few weeks, that sucks. But it's not quite so final. But in March, that's all it takes. That's why it's so hard to win 6 games in a row in March, because any one little thing can crop up and get you. And Houston was already not the deepest team due to injuries, and Jamal Shead was the one player that just proved irreplaceable. Houston just couldn't do without. They got real damn close. The team sure didn't quit. It would have been real easy to lose by double digits to Duke, the way that game was going at some time. But Houston never let Duke get away with it. Houston put themselves in a position to still have a great chance to try and win that game down the stretch, but just proved a little too much. And yeah, like I said, it's just one of those things that just as soon as the game is over, you just go, yeah, I'm gonna be thinking about that what if question for years and probably decades, to be honest.
Yeah, I think in real time, what was extra frustrating is that it almost seemed like U of H had gone through, like, you were up by 6, kind of like you pointed out, and I don't think you'd even played your best basketball. Like, I really think that this team was going to finish a lot stronger than they started, and the way they started was genuinely controlling the game while Jamal Shead was available for the Cougars. I mean, I can't prove it, but I think the Cougars went 4 minutes without scoring after that really hot start to the game. And yeah, like you, I'm so convinced, not that U of H would have 100% run Duke off the floor like some of the opponents we saw this year. I do think Duke was too good of a team to lose by some of the really big margins that the Cougars had laid on previous opponents this season. But yeah, I think the Cougars would have won this game. The only saving grace, Dustin, for this game's officials is that the bar was so low from the round of 32 game against A&M, and what a travesty that one is. But this game's crew still allowed Duke's players, none more so than Kyle Filipowski, to get foul calls for very questionable contact. And I think the most flagrant misses involved one Mr. Filipowski lowering his shoulder into U of H players, and somehow I think at least one case drawing a foul off that. And free throw shooting, I think on the Cougar side, was a frustrating aspect of this one. If Wani and Javier shoot their season averages, maybe you win this game. That's how narrow the margins were, even without Jamal Shead. I guess it's slightly less of a bitter pill to swallow when it's your big men who haven't been the best free throw shooters this year versus maybe, I don't know, your guards. I thought both guys, though, Wani and Javier, did a fantastic job on the offensive glass against an opponent that we knew coming in had a lot of size, a lot of talented size. And if Friday ends up being his last game in Scarlet and Albino, though I think we've gotten decent indications that he's open to playing a 6th year here. I think Wani gave you a really commendable performance if this is indeed it for his college career, and ditto for LJ Cryer, another player who I think we've heard positive signs about coming back. I think the guy who certainly took on the largest amount of the scoring load after Shead went out hurt, and trying to keep the focus on this game and not zooming out too much and going bigger picture. If this was his last game, it's a credit to LJ that he played a big role in allowing U of H to hang around against a good opponent while the team was largely without its first team All-American point guard. There's more than a few fans of Cryer's previous school that talked before the season about he's a bad defender, and you'll see. And I gotta say, all I saw in this past season, Dustin, was a tough as nails guard who fit perfectly into the tough-minded culture of UH basketball. I think like some previous one-year Cougs, Kyler Edwards and Tajay Moore, but with a higher ceiling as a scorer than those two guys just mentioned, great as those two guys were during their Cougar career. Obviously, hope I have one more year of LJ Cryer playing for my alma mater and in this program, but if this year ends up being the sole year, it was an incredible one. And certainly LJ will be a player always inextricably linked to this incredible season. Wasn't Emmanuel Sharp's best game. I'm sure he'll be thinking about that last shot longer than you, me, or anyone listening, to us talking to microphones about this game. And, you don't see anything like fan backlash, but it's worth reminding ourselves that you're not even in this position where the Cougs make the Sweet 16 at all if Emmanuel Sharp doesn't have one of his best single game, and really one of the best single game U of H postseason performances, period, under Kelvin Sampson against A&M in the round of 32. I think just a lot of things to be positive about, even if the end result is very frustrating. And like you, Dustin, I expect I'll be for many, many years kind of pondering this what if and how deep do we go, and what if Jamal Shead doesn't turn his ankle? Not to they keep beating that dead horse, or in this case, badly sprained ankle.
Yeah, you kind of mentioned it. You can start with the officials, and I think that's fair. I started the other way, which is just, I think the other great what if coming out of this game, besides the Jamal Shead getting hurt one, is so what if Houston had made their damn free throws, And I didn't like every call in this game. I think it's fair to criticize the refs. I thought Filipowski in particular got an and one in the last couple of minutes. That was a clear as day charge that obviously had an impact on the outcome of the game. But Houston shot 17 free throws. They shot 5 more than Duke. I'd have bit your hand off pregame if you could have offered me those numbers. And they missed 8 of their 17 free throws and lost by 3 points. And you're right, it is mostly forwards, and that makes it a little bit more understandable. But man, it doesn't matter who you're sending to the line. You got to do better than 9 out of 17, and when the game is that close. And it's the kind of free throw shooting performance that will keep, I think, similar to what if Jamal Shead doesn't get hurt, similar to what if Emmanuel Sharp hits that 3-pointer at the buzzer or whatever. It's going to keep a lot of people up at night, just what if Houston could have done better than 8 missed free throws out of 17. And Houston for the year, it wasn't a good free throw shooting team on the balance this year. It made less than 69% of their free throws on the year. They ranked 301st in the country, and it cost them at times. They went just 8 of 12 from the line against Iowa State, a game that was tied in the closing seconds. They went 9 of 13 at TCU, a game they lost by 1. And they went 8 of 17 in this one and lost by 3. So, last year the Cougs overall were pretty good at the line, but, even worse 2 years ago. So Kelvin Sampson has never really had a bad free throw shooting team at Houston until it happened now 2 of the last 3 years. And, free throw shooting is something that impacts winning. We've seen it. 3 of Houston's 5 losses this year. Free throw misses were a significant factor. So you have to imagine that is a topic that is going to keep Kelvin Sampson and the Houston Brain Trust. I think they're going to be thinking about that this offseason and how you address that going forward. So that is something to to stress about. But, I do kind of want to bring it back, though, to just kind of what we talked about a little bit earlier, which is just, what an unbelievable season it's been, what an unbelievable run it's been, just how unbelievably hard everyone in this program has worked. And just really everyone that's set foot in the court. You kind of talked about with, Houston isn't here unless Emmanuel Sharp puts up that big game against A&M in the previous round. But just every single guy on the roster you can point to and go, if he doesn't step up when called upon, Houston doesn't get this far, from Jamal Shead down to, like we talked about, with Ryan Elvin in the A&M game. It's really, there's not a guy on the roster I don't think that you can point to and go, oh, that guy didn't really have that much of an impact on this team, having the season that they did, winning the Big 12 in their first year in the Big 12 by 2 games, going to a 5th straight Sweet 16, just earning a number 1 seed, looking like the number 1 team in the country for much of the year. It was everyone. It was Jamal Shead. It was Sed Lott, a freshman that you didn't think was gonna play this year, coming in and giving you some really big minutes after after JoJo Tugler got hurt. So just, again, you go back to the word bittersweet, right? Just it's a bitter pill to swallow, but it's just been so unbelievably fun watching this team, and we've been so treated so unbelievably well to what we've got to see this year, up to and including this team just playing their absolute tails off trying to get back into this one.
Nobody enjoys their season ending in a loss, even though that's how the season has ended, or I guess for a handful will end for 361 Division I men's basketball teams. I think I have had some time to reflect on it, and I think this isn't anything unique. I would say it's probably something similar to the majority opinion on Cougar fans, but with that time to reflect, I'm really proud of this team and everyone involved with the program, whether they're a player or a coach or staff member or just fans like us. I think should be proud of this team in this season. One of the worst things that has kind of seeped into college sports fandom, over the recent years, is come from pro fandom. It's kind of the rings culture. People who dismiss any team in any season that didn't end up in being the sports champions. This is going to be a season that I will remember as long as I live. To go into the country's toughest men's basketball conference and in your first season win the title, that's fucking incredible. Like, there'll never be more than a handful of U of H sporting events, Dustin, that I've been to, in person, that will top going back to Houston and watching the regular season finale with you, my good friend, this season, watching U of H just tear Kansas limb from limb, celebrating the Big 12 title, watching the team and coaches cut down the nets in a new league. I get goosebumps talking about it, and I'm sure I will years from now. I think my sincerest hope is that nobody out there lets the way the season ended on Friday take away from what was a really joyful several months of following this program. I mean, you said I feel fortunate, blessed, lucky, whatever you want to call it, to have experienced this program's rise in the decade or so since Kelvin Sampson took over. Even if this season ended a little more prematurely than we wanted to, I think we are still so fortunate. There's so many fans of so many teams out there, Dustin, that will never get to experience the kind of run that we have the last 5 or 6 years following this program and whatever is to come. Like this isn't going to end this season. Exactly what it'll look like over the next several years, no one can say for sure, but this team isn't going to go back to James Dickey era basketball. Not to speak our former coach's name. Like this is going to be at the very least, very good program for the foreseeable future. And that's really cool, even if we all wish this season had ended a different way.
Yeah, and just I guess one last thought to kind of for the season as a whole is one of the things that makes me feel so lucky about getting to watch this team. I mean, it's just how unbelievably talented this team is and how well they've played and all the games that they've won this year. But also, there's such a cheerforable bunch of guys, and we don't know who's all going to be here next year apart from it. Being pretty clear that Jamal Shead will be moving on to the pro ranks and Damian Dunn hitting the transfer portal, which we'll talk about in a bit. But just, grateful to everybody, the players, coaching staff, everybody that makes it possible to have a Cougar basketball season, because that's so many people beyond even the ones that we talk about on a regular basis. But then on a personal note, this is the first season of Cougar basketball that me and my fiance were living together through. And I think she was a little apprehensive coming into the season about how much of a priority that this thing is for me, which is totally fair. But she embraced it all the way. She came in with me to Allen Fieldhouse. She paid her own way to go to the Sweet 16 with me. She came to as many home games as her schedule would allow. And she was every bit as emotional as I was on Friday night. And that's sports at its best, right? Not to get a little too, cheesy and melodramatic, but when sports is at its best, it's when it's something that's bringing you together with people that you care about. That's why doing this podcast is fun. It's sharing something with you and with Bobby. It's in a small way sharing something with everybody who tunes in. It's, when you show up to the Fertitta Center and everyone is getting to share being part of that insane atmosphere, which is, one of the things about this year that I think maybe haven't talked about enough yet on this episode, is just what an unbelievable year it was for the Houston broader fan community and the atmosphere at the Fertitta Center. But, this game ended, and over the course of the season, like I said, so many people that I've never known to care in the least about Cougar sports or college or even college sports more broadly. My fiance's brother just has never. He's famously the one in the family that doesn't care about sports. Stayed up till whatever hour of the night watching the A&M game in the previous round. Just so many people at work that never cared about basketball are stopping me to talk about the NCAA tournament run because they know that my fiance's friend who I've never heard her speak a word about sports is texting me and I'm so sorry your team lost. We were pulling for them with you. And it's just that's the good shit, man. That's when sports is fun. It's when you're sharing it with someone, and sports can absolutely bring people together and be a beautiful thing, even when your team isn't doing well. as Cougar fans, we certainly have no shortage of real life examples of bonding with others over bad teams. When you get to share that with someone, and your team is good as hell, and your team is likable as hell, and you're just living it together, it's one of life's great highs. There really is nothing quite like it.
And something I don't think that's minimized at all by the way the season ended. Like,
No.
yeah, obviously wish it was different, but yeah, like you, despite living very far from Houston, as somebody who regularly plasters myself in UAH stuff, I had people texting me work. I had a work client who's, I would say, probably somewhere between a casual and really dedicated Duke fan, but like a dedicated enough Duke fan in the last couple years. They've gone to Cameron Indoor. They live in that part of North Carolina, and they unsolicited like emailed me the other day and just like, yeah, you guys would have beaten us without Shead. Like, sorry your season ended that way. And it's just like, that's we've arrived in that sense. Like, wish it was us arriving because we were the team cutting down the nets and one shining moment was playing. But again, there are people who are fans of like pretty good college basketball programs who will never experience what you and I have gotten to experience. And that doesn't take away the pain of losing the game. I'm not trying to, say that mitigates it necessarily, but like, I don't know. This is a run that you and I wouldn't have dreamed of 10 years ago. Like 10-ish years ago, I was coming over to the place I ended up living with you, but before I moved in, to watch us lose to, I think it was George Mason in the CBI. Like that's where this program was. And that was at that point our most successful season of the few around it. Like, that's just how different it's been. And so that's going to continue, and that's really exciting, but we can kind of pay our last respects to this season. We're going to obviously talk about, I think, the bigger picture of the season, maybe what the roster is going to look like, future facing stuff once Bobby's back with us, but had to give the eulogy to the season in the kind of frustrating and incomplete way it kind of feels like an incredible Cougar basketball team season is going to end on.
Yeah. All right, Sam, should we stick with the hoops and talk? Oh, no, we got to talk Damian Dunn. We did want to talk a little bit more.
Real quick, some Cougar men's basketball news.
Yeah, Damian Dunn was kind of announced on social media. A few people had it today. I think, what's his name? Goodman had it first.
Yeah, Jeff Goodman, I believe, was first. Yeah.
Jeff Goodman. Damian Dunn in the transfer portal. Really not surprising. It was kind of funny. Earlier in the day, I was going back and forth with a few people on Twitter about the roster situation for next year. I'd forgotten that Dunn had eligibility. It seemed that ship seemed so sailed that it didn't seem to matter. And I think it, and again, what I said earlier about every player on the roster had to make plays for Houston to have the season that they had. I'll include Damian Dunn in that, certainly. But I think you can say that and also say, at the other hand, that Damian Dunn is kind of had the rare Houston taking a transfer in men's basketball where it didn't kind of pan out the way that I think everyone involved thought it would, where Damian Dunn was either going to be a starter or kind of just consistent offense off the bench, and really just never figured out how to consistently get on the score sheet for Houston, which is kind of what they brought him in to do. So, made some great plays this year. Certainly will leave everyone with some good memories, and we certainly wish him well going forward. But yeah, I think that's kind of the rare play that comes in, and because it seems so much better on paper than the way it ended up turning out, unfortunately.
Only thing I'd add is that this feels like the best move for both parties.
Yeah.
Not that, like you said, it was close to all bad. Damian came out big in some key moments this season. That absurd bad angle banked in three he had at the Kansas regular season finale is going to be one of the crazier UH basketball things that I've ever gotten to witness in person. I'm glad he finally got to experience the NCAA tournament after being a very good player on some not so great Temple teams. And I think they're fairly high level Division I programs that he can go into and be a leading contributor. And I hope that happens. He seems like a good kid. And I think this is the ideal move for all concerned as he plays his final college season.
Yeah. And speaking of outgoing basketball transfer, Sam, now we'll get to it. The women's hoops team has seen 4 players in the last couple of days, I believe it is, hit the transfer portal, highlighted by Cameron Jones, a player I was definitely not hoping to see hit the transfer portal.
Yeah, we don't have all the answers of what next year's UH women's basketball roster is going to look like, but a little better idea after. I didn't even put this together until now, Dustin, but first reported by Jeff Goodman's daughter, Talia Goodman. I believe that UH players Cameron Jones, Jasira Diawara, Asia Thompson, and Amari Khan, the sum total, Cameron Jones, I think, being the highlight player of the 4, will be going into the transfer portal. These departures are in addition to athletes who have already exhausted their eligibility, like Britt Anyajay, Nia Boyd, Bria Patterson, and Shalexis Aaron. out of that group of four, only Jones and Diawara saw anything close to consistent action this year. Jones was in the same freshman class as Layla Blair and started 57 games over her UH career, averaged over 20 minutes per game the last 2 seasons, but never really developed into a consistent scorer after flashing high-level ability at times. Her first couple seasons, Diawara was a JUCO transfer. She had an All-American season last year at Clarendon College, but only averaged 2 points and 2 rebounds per game in just under 10 minutes. This past season, Thompson and Kahn never really were consistent rotation players in their multiple years in the Cougar program. I mean, taken on their own, none of these 4 specific transfers are disastrous. I just think you combine that with a lot of graduations and the completely hypothetical, but I think very possible, happening that Layla Blair might decide to play her final college season somewhere else. I think it also adds to the pretty large number of roster spots that need filling. And maybe I could have missed it, but I searched pretty thoroughly and I've not seen an indication that U of H signed any high school players. And assuming no one else leaves, that means you still have 7 scholarships left to fill. I know it's never been easier to fill your roster with transfers and more common to do so, but the thought of replacing the vast majority of your key contributors with new players, even if Layla Blair returns, and everything else, I don't think should make you that optimistic. And I promise, Dustin, I won't turn every piece of U of H women's basketball news into a referendum on the apparent decision of U of H to retain the current head coach, but it is something, I'm going to close this, just to see how much the women's game is growing, to see how much attention is on this current tournament. Like the tickets to the women's Final Four are like double the men's, and just that the games of recent note have been these big capital S sporting events, not college sporting events, like sporting events that have captured the sporting world at large. And just based on the investment in the program, the apparent decision to keep on a coach of a decade plus of not making the tournament, the obvious, I think by their actions, how little U of H leadership values being good at this sport. And that's frustrating. I just adding on to that and just seeing how compelling this tournament is and the lack of urgency to be anything close to this from the people who run this athletic department.
Man, I didn't even realize we didn't even have any freshmen coming in. That's pretty grim. And that seems to me to be a symptom of, you've got a coach who is pretty clearly, I think the reason is there's some understanding maybe that Pesman was going to give everybody 2 years in the Big 12 to kind of get settled. But
you're right, but it's such bullshit. But you're right.
The football coach, but what that means in this context is you've got a coach who is just flagrantly, wildly not met expectations. And that's not even just, again, I think I said this before, but it's not us putting outside expectations on him. We had him on, 5-6 years ago on the podcast. And he's like, my goal is to go to the Sweet 16 this year. Okay, it's been several years since then. We haven't even seen this team get to the tournament, let alone win 2 games this year. So he's not meeting his own expectations. If Pesman has any, he can't possibly be meeting Pesman's. I don't think he's, based on what little interaction we get from other Cougar fans about women's basketball. No one seems happy with what's going on. So you've got a coach who's pretty clearly just desperately going, oh man, last year, the rope is out at the end of next year, and just coaching desperately, which means whenever presumably a year from now we'll be talking about a new Cougar women's basketball coach. But it's like, okay, the whoever it is going to be inheriting a roster that's one more year of just no base of young players coming in, just a roster that's going to be even more just, nothing left in the cupboard for the next coach. So it's not even just that you're punting down the road 1 year by letting Huey come back when he just clearly doesn't have what it takes to get this team to the promised land. It's making things 1 year more difficult for the next coach to come in, because you've got a coach who is just obviously going to just grab whatever transfers are available to him and just try to throw everything against the wall and hope that something sticks next year. But, optimistically, the U of H website has a 24-25 roster on it with the 5 or 6 players that have eligibility and haven't hit the portal yet. They include Layla Blair in there under the optimistic, fingers crossed, hopes that she will come play a 5th season in the Scarlet and Albino. But it's just not looking good in terms of the roster that's going to be around her. And I mean, you talk about players not developing here, but Jasira Diawara coming in with JUCO All-American, looking like it's been too often under Huey that we've seen players not develop, and it's been too often under Huey that we've seen players come in with seemingly impressive CVs and then just look mediocre once they get here. So it's however you want to diagnose it, it's not working out.
Yeah, I'm not saying Diawara should come in here and immediately, average her JUCO numbers here. A significant jump from JUCO ball to the Big 12, but like, I don't know, maybe developed into like a 5.7 rebound rotation big like that. I think that would have been at least somewhat of a success. And like you say, just consistently don't see that. And yeah, it's short termism because this coach, I think, naturally probably feels like his time here is short if he doesn't win significantly, but that's going to be bad for the roster build, and it's gonna push the clock back even further on whoever the next coach is, because no coach is going to be with a program in perpetuity. Eventually, some change is going to be made there, even if it's going to potentially last more than a decade under the same regime. And yeah, it's frustrating. I think we are people who generally would like people to care about U of H's entire athletic offering. Like, we're not going to force it down anyone's throat, but I think the way to be a fan of a school, like, you could care about some sports more than others. You don't have to devote all of your time to an entire school's worth of intercollegiate offerings, but to not just be football and men's basketball fans, like to support the entire offering. And stuff like this and general decisions like this don't make it easier to, I think, to sell that to Cougar fans who are kind of just like, well, why should I care about women's basketball? It's obviously people running the athletic department don't seem to.
Yeah, and I mean,
That's a bummer of a note to end on. I know the topic
yeah,
on, I know,
no,
but
it's not, and it's not even like we've got a fan base that just doesn't care about women's sports. We've seen with
No.
volleyball over the last few years, like with team getting good, so many people in person when they like we'll see them again online. Just well, oh yeah, I'm so glad you guys have been talking about women's volleyball. It's been so much fun. I've started watching the games. I started going to the games. The attendance just spiked this year, where I think we averaged more fans this year than our previous like single game high attendance or some crazy number. Like, the fan base is more than excited to support women's sports at U of H if they're winning and if they're being
foreshadowing,
run.
but softball in a previous era as well.
Yeah, we had good softball turnouts when that softball team was good. It was this fan base wants to support winning teams, and it just doesn't seem like Chris Pesman is interested in women's basketball being a winning team in the foreseeable future. All right, well, that was a bummer. Let's talk about bat and ball sports, which have also been a bummer. Sam's, I think, going to take softball in a little bit. I'll start with the baseball team. Sam, I want you to think back to a simpler time. Pi Day, March 14th. Houston baseball had just swept Baylor, and then on Pi Day stomped BYU and Provo 9-2, improving to 4-0 in Big 12 play. Let's all just live there for a moment. It's nice, right? It's nice. And you know what? Before we talk about how Big 12 play has gone since then, let's talk Silver Glove, baby. Over the last couple of weeks, Woo! Houston swept the 3-game season series against Rice. They did so, oddly enough, by winning 4-1, 4-2, and 4-3 in that order. They clinched the series on my birthday, a game that I was at. All right, end of report. All is well with Cougar baseball land. Moving on to... Oh, wait, no. Unfortunately, the part that I'm leaving out is that Houston has lost 8 straight Big 12 games. They lost the last 2 games at BYU 4-2 and 10-8. They got swept at home by Kansas State 5-3, 6-5, 9-3, and then got swept at TCU 14-1, 6-2, 6-4. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that everybody who wants to see Houston baseball do well thinks that an 8-game losing streak is bad. Very bad, even. But I guess, to what extent do I think the sky is falling? I kind of find myself of going back and forth I'm of two minds on this one. On the one hand, if you listen to me read out those scores, you may notice 5 of those 8 games were decided by 1 or 2 runs. There's almost certainly an element of bad luck to lose that many games in a row that are that close. Over the span of, say, a 162-game MLB season, you'll see little flukes like that kind of even out over the long run. You might lose 5 close games in a row in April, then win 5 close games in a row in May. Not because your team got dramatically better, but just because that stuff just kind of happens. But in a 30-game Big 12 season, those 5 close losses loom large, and the 8-game losing streak that Houston is on now accounts for over a quarter of their conference schedule. And also, as much as maybe losing all 5 of those games might be a fluke, you also got beat pretty badly 3 times, and in 8 games have never won a game by just putting it out of reach over that span either. So, and especially with the Kansas State series, I think anytime you get swept at home, that's a bitter pill to swallow. The Wildcats are a good team, but I don't think they're like title contention good in the Big 12. TCU on the road, you might say that's a little more understandable. They were the Big 12 favorites coming into conference play, looked real good in non-conference, but holy crap, they couldn't win a damn conference game before facing Houston. They were 2-7 in Big 12 play before the Cougars came to town, and then they beat us, scoring at least 6 runs in every game and allowing only 7 runs total over the entire weekend. And in terms of what's just not working for Houston right now, it hasn't just been one thing. Neither the pitching nor the hitting has really been very good over that span. But I think the biggest change from early on in the season is just the lineup dropping off. We saw this Cougar team score 6 to 12 runs in each of the 3 games against St. John's, who turned out as looking like a pretty solid team right now. Cougs scored 7 and 13 in 2 different games at Minute Maid. They got put up an 8 spot against Baylor, put up a 9 and an 8 up at BYU. And then now in Houston's last 10 games overall, their highest run total in any single game has been 6, which they did just 1 time against Lamar, and then 5, which they did just 1 time against Kansas State. 8 of their last 10 games, Houston has scored 4 or fewer runs. And yes, they've played some Big 12 teams with some good pitching staffs during that stretch. But I'm glad we swept Rice, because it's not because of the lineup. Because, again, Houston scored 4 runs in every game against a Rice team with a season ERA of 5.67, throwing its midweek guys. Not a good pitching staff, not a good team. And it's like, it's not even like a couple guys. It's just a lot of guys who are hitting well early on in the season that have all kind of slumped together. Justin Murray hasn't had a multi-hit game in that 10-game stretch. Harold Cole, just 8 total hits in those 10 games. Kenneth Jimenez hitting 222 over that period. Trey Jones is 3 for 20. Ace Reese is 4 for 33. I'm not picking on those guys because I think they're bad at baseball. Among your hitters with enough at-bats to qualify on the year, those are literally your top 5 guys by batting average on the year, and none of them is hitting well right now. I don't know what the answer is, but it's clearly just a Houston lineup that didn't look like an untalented lineup early on in the season. Like I said, against some decent teams, put up some decent run totals, but has lost its mojo or something. Don't know what's going on there, but it's not been good news as of late for the Cougar lineup. Pitching-wise, maybe a little bit more of a mixed bag. The good news is that Jackson Jelkin, who had been dinged up, looked real good against TCU this last weekend. 6 1/3 innings, 2 hits, both of them singles, 2 earned runs, 7 strikeouts. Kyle Calamero wasn't great, but had his longest start of the year, 4 innings. Looks like he might be rounding into in-season shape after dealing with some injuries coming into the year. The only real bad news, I think, in the starting rotation, Antoine Jean, who had looked like your ace, got hit real hard by TCU. 9 hits and 0 strikeouts in 4 innings. That's 2 of his last 3 starts that he's gotten hit really hard. Houston needs him to continue looking like the earlier season version of himself. And I think, it's not too tough to envision kind of going forward those 3 guys forming a pretty respectable weekend rotation. And I think like I said, we've seen this lineup do some good things. I think we know that this pitching staff has some talent. So Houston's, 8-game losing streak, but you're 4 and 8 in Big 12 play, and your next 3 series are Texas Tech, UT Austin, and Cincinnati. The Red Raiders and the Longhorns are in the 50s of the RPI at present. The Bearcats are in the 90s. So you know what? If you're a Houston Cougar baseball player, you think you're better than 4 and 8, go win some games. You've got some reasonably winnable games coming up. And like I said, I don't think this is a completely untalented Houston baseball team that can't do better than what they're doing. But you got to pull out of the nosedive and do it quickly. First chance to do that is going to be in Lubbock this coming weekend, facing Texas Tech. Red Raiders are an impressive 16-2 in non-conference games this year, with their only 2 losses coming to Tennessee and Oregon State, the current number 11 and number 12, respectively, in the RPI. However, not many super impressive wins among the 16 non-conference games, and they are just 5-7, a game ahead of the Cougars in Big 12 play. That is why, despite a pretty healthy 21-9 overall record, the current RPI only slots Tech in at number 58. In Big 12 play, Tech hasn't been involved in any sweeps. They lost 2 of 3 at home to UT Austin, and on the road to Baylor and UCF, they won 2 of 3 at home against BYU. And in terms of what to expect this weekend, Dan Lawfield at Rip Griffin Park, that's a bit of a mouthful, appears to be a pretty hitter-friendly park. Their 6 Big 12 home games have seen combined run totals between the 2 teams of 30, 9, 16, 13, 7, and 11 runs. Their 6 road games combined totals of 2, 6, 9, 9, 3, and 5. So might be seeing a very different series with this series being in Lubbock as opposed to if it had been in Houston. So, while the Red Raiders do have some gaudy offensive numbers, they're hitting .319 as a team with 51 homers. Both of those marks are top 20 in the country. It is maybe a little bit hard to disentangle that from a non-conference schedule with a lot of cupcakes on it and what appears to be a pretty hitter-friendly home ballpark. But you know what? You're playing in that ballpark, so at some point it doesn't matter. I think it's a tough task for this Cougar pitching staff either way. And we've seen the staff be kind of inconsistent when it comes to command this year. There's some stretches where they'll go multiple games with very few walks allowed. Then they'll have a stretch of 2 or 3 games where all of a sudden they're missing the zone a lot more, issuing a lot more free passes. But, to me, this clearly needs to be one of the hitting the zone weekends, because you just can't put base runners on against a team that is hitting an environment where they hit a lot of homers, because that's walks all of a sudden make, 1-run homers into 2 and 3-run homers, and that will doom you every time. So, I'm not completely giving up on this Cougar baseball team just yet. They do have over half of their Big 12 campaign still in front of them, and they're not just wildly far back in the standings. That opening sweep over Baylor really buoying them right now. But like I said, I think it just comes back to, this isn't an untalented team. I don't think this team is incapable of winning series of any of their next 3 or 4 series. Really any series they play the rest of the way. I wouldn't bet a whole lot of money against them coming back and maybe being able to beat some of these teams 2 out of 3. But man, you can't just look like a talented team. You got to actually start winning some games. You got to start hitting the ball. You got to pull out an 8-game nosedive and get some positive momentum. And hopefully we'll see them do that this weekend up in Lubbock.
Yeah, I'm glad you kind of said it. It's not a team where, to get to our next team, not to spoil that, but it's a lot less black and white what the culprit is to why this team is on the Big 12 losing streak it is. And I think it's easier to talk yourself into, hey, like this team could play better going forward, that they aren't maybe as far, but also an 8-game Big 12 losing streak and going to a team that hits the ball very well in their home ballpark does also feel like a daunting task. I hope it's not the case. Wouldn't floor me if that becomes an 11-game losing streak by the time we're talking. I hope not. I really, really hope not, but wouldn't surprise me if it did.
Yeah, you'd like to hope that, because again, it kind of feels like maybe your weekend rotation of Jelkin, John, and Calamento is maybe finally coming together. You'd like to think that this could be the weekend that you kind of finally see those guys hitting on all cylinders. And I think, like I said, it wouldn't surprise me to see Houston win 2 of 3 if you can.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't. But yeah, an 11-game losing streak wouldn't a week from now wouldn't surprise me either, unfortunately. So yeah, we'll see.
You want to get into softball, Dustin?
Let's get into softball, Sam.
Sorry to say, the general outlook isn't a lot rosier for your Cougar softball program since we last talked about them. I believe that was me and Bobby previewing the Kansas series. The Cougars are 1-5 against Big 12 opponents, getting swept in the Kansas series, and I think probably the bigger missed opportunity of the two, only taking 1 of 3 on the road at BYU. Will give the Cougs a small bit of credit. Kansas is a top 25 caliber team, and 2 of those 3 losses were by 1 run when the Cougs had the potential tying runner on base and held the Jayhawks to respectable run totals. I think the Sunday series finale against Kansas was the biggest heartbreaker. The Cougs had multiple runners on. Lyre Butte, one of your better hitters at the plate, but unfortunately grounded in a double play. Cougs ended up losing that one 2-1. Frustrating to have come so close, but at least for that series, you could point to there being a hit here or a hit there away from taking a game or maybe even taking the series off a very good Big 12 program. I think it's the most recent series last Thursday and Friday at BYU that has frustrated me the most. BYU came into that series 2-7 in Big 12 play. Granted, one of those was against a top 10 Oklahoma State team, but that series laid bare, I think, the struggles this Cougar team continues to have with pitching. The Cougars got run ruled in the first game 11-3 last Thursday, and in the first game on Friday, they did a doubleheader to complete the series. The Cougs actually looked like they could have been on the verge of run ruling BYU before the Cougs with a U put a 5 spot in the bottom of the 5th and made what was ultimately a U of H win a bit more dramatic than it had to be. We'll shout out freshman Michaela Nita going 3 of 4 with 3 ribbies while batting cleanup in that one. Starting pitcher Shelby Smith also helped out her cause by going 2 of 3 at the plate. And you can't blame the Cougar bats for the series finale loss. Cougars put up 15 runs on 17 hits, Dustin. It's a pretty
eight at first, I believe, right?
Yeah, pretty gaudy total. I don't know if I've ever seen any U of H bat and ball sport team score that amount of runs and have it ultimately be in a losing effort. I know Provo's at elevation and they've had some big offensive games this season. BYU has. If this was just a fluky data point, then you don't really draw any conclusions. But this game, ultimately a 17-15 loss, was the 7th in 12 conference games to date, Dustin, where the Cougars allowed 9 or more runs from an opposing lineup. That is a astronomical number for softball. Like that's a high number for baseball. Like I think that, and that's you and I's maybe frame of context, but that number is just absurd for softball, the way the Cougar pitching has struggled. I wanted to also share some numbers from a friend of the pod, Cole, who does a fantastic job digging into Cougar softball and following that program specifically. BYU had scored 44 runs in 9 Big 12 games prior to their series with U of H. In just 3 games against U of H, BYU managed to score 34 runs. Like that's a lot, man. And even the midweek game with HBU, who no, I won't be calling them anything else, didn't even give you a 1-game break from stressing about the pitching. The Cougar hitters, I think, did what you could reasonably expect them to do against an HBU level opponent. Shelby Smith got a break from pitching and went 3 for 4 with an RBI. Multi-hit games also from Kennedy Thomas and Jasmine Rollin. The fielding behind the Cougar pitchers was pretty poor, worth noting. They had 4 errors in the night, but 14 hits allowed in 7 innings to that level of an opponent. It's just not even close to where you want to be. So up next for the Cougs, Dustin, I'd say your second series of the year to date against a really high-end Big 12 opponent, though Kansas, I think, has looked pretty close to one. You have the Oklahoma State Cowgirls coming to Houston. Instead of talking exclusively about how difficult the current year's version of OSU will be for the Cougs, OSU kind of gives me an in to talk about one of the really great U of H sports teams of our, I think, between the two of us, our 17, 18-ish years of earnest U of H fandom, the 2011 Cougar softball team. Can I take a quick detour here, Dustin? Asking you like we haven't talked about this well prior to the show. I would say that 2011 team is in kind of a 1A, 1B situation for best team in program history with the 2008 team. Is that a fair assessment, you would say, as somebody from who's lived that era?
Yeah, for sure.
The 2011 team won the CUSA title, were sent a few hours west to an absurdly stacked Austin Regional. I mean, you had the host Longhorns, who were in a dominant era of their program, had lost well under 10 times that season. Cougs also had to contend with UL Lafayette, one of the sport's most consistent powers, the alma mater of then head coach Kyla Hollis, as well, the very team that ended that 2008 Cougar team's season in Houston, the one I just mentioned a moment ago. And Cougs decisively beat the Raging Cajuns in the regional series opener 7-2. And I think one of those really great U of H sports fan moments of our decade and change following this program that I've kind of maybe not remembered as much as I should for what an incredible game it was. A classic softball 1-0 pitchers duel in the next game against the Longhorns, where Donna Bourgeois and Amanda Crabtree combined for 7 innings of scoreless. 3-hit ball. Cougs were able to get Katie Beth Sherman home after a leadoff bunt single the first, and that ended up being the deciding run. Worth reiterating how unbelievably clutch Amanda Crabtree was in the circle. In this one, she inherited runners and added one herself in the 4th inning. It was a bases loaded, 1-out situation. The Horns crowd is really feeling it, if memory serves. I think I was watching this on ESPN, U or News. It's been a bit. The memory's a little foggy there. Crabtree strikes out back-to-back hitters. I checked the box score play-by-play to confirm my vague memories. Pretty drama-free final 3 innings in the circle. Crabtree sends the Cougs to the regional finals. That game was also the 19th shutout by the Cougar pitching staff that season. Really incredible tally. Regional final was a rematch with ULL. Pretty intense, was tied at 1 after 5 innings, but Cougs would pull away in the final 2 innings, win the Austin Regional, beating a Raging Cajuns team twice in a weekend after I think they had lost 8 games the entire season before the postseason to that point. Cougs went to Oklahoma State for the Super Regionals, got shut out in their first game, a loss, came back and won a pitcher's duel in a do-or-die game 2 with 7 scoreless from Donna Bourgeois. A Holly Anderson RBI single kept the Cougs season alive. Cougs would ultimately lose the deciding game 3, 6-5, though we did get some late game heroics from a pinch hit Bailey Lott home run, and it ended up being ultimately her final at bat for the Cougar program. It was a tough end to that season, and to kind of take this back to the present, that season was a special one that we got to, live vicariously through as fans, Dustin. I'm not even saying that season should be the norm for Cougar softball, but there were a number of other really quality Cougar softball seasons in and around the two that I've mentioned specifically, 2008 and 2011 from the past, in a much more cash poor athletic department as a Conference USA school. And that's why it's so frustrating to me now, because this is now at present time a Big 12 school, and everything I would say, not to speak to you here, our eyes tell us when we watch this program, is that Cougar softball is a lot worse. And there are things that even a relative softball idiot like myself could have foreseen happening that are now happening this season. Is it a resource thing? I really wish I had a more clear answer to that, but it is a big source of frustration. I've gone long on this, so I will keep my Oklahoma State present day thoughts concise. Certainly really good team they can expect to be finishing their season in OKC. If anything, I think national perception is kind of behind on how good they are, because they just so happen to be in the same state with the preeminent softball powers, Oklahoma, but the Cowgirls are very, very good. Number 6 team in the latest ESPN top 25, 9-3 in Big 12 play. They just took a home series against the Longhorns, who are themselves still a top 10 program. They hit for average and power. They have one of the best pitchers in the country in Lexi Kilfoyle, an extremely good second option in Ivy Rosenberry. Carolina Wong, a transfer from Liberty, is hitting 368 with double-digit home runs. I don't have the time to list off all of OSU's good hitters, but trust me, Dustin, they have a lot of them. And we'll also note, if you want some optimism to end this, I think, very pessimistic last several minutes of me talking here, they have dropped road games to other not so high in the standings Big 12 teams. They've lost them 1 of 3 in previous series to BYU and Baylor specifically. And this Cougar team did take a game off of UT and wasn't too far off of maybe even taking the series against a very good, I would say equivalently good program to this OSU team. I certainly hope we see another weekend of this team rise at the moment. I think they have it in them, but worth repeating, this is a very, very good opponent. Like, this could be a very difficult weekend.
Yeah. Tough time against Oklahoma State, and especially a team with that many good hitters, like you mentioned. I have exactly one softball thought to sum up how Big 12 play has gone so far. Houston's lineup, Houston's batters have scored 70 runs in 80 innings. That is very good. Houston is 3-9 in Big 12 play. You should not be 3-9 in Big 12 play if you have scored 70 runs in 80 innings. But that is what happens when you give up 98 runs in 77 and 2/3 innings. Brutal.
That's insane. Like, I would say this team, if you just looked at the conference ERA, and I'm not going to look at the conference ERA for every Division I softball program, but it could be dead last. Like, conceivably, if you told me that, like, if you had the data set, and like, yeah, no, this team has the absolute worst conference ERA in the country, I'd be like, yeah, it's believable.
It's hard to do worse than 838.
Like, that's an awful baseball number, and baseball has 2 more innings.
That's an awful 9-inning number. It is an incomprehensibly bad 7-inning number.
And again, like, not to insult young women who are far better athletes than you or I could ever conceive of being, but it was easy to see. You didn't have any pitchers in this roster who were proven at anything close to Big 12 level. And you have the lineup, like you pointed out, 70 runs in 80 innings. Like, that's good. The lineup is as good, I think, about as we expected in the preseason with a lot of proven college hitters. You can't tell me there wasn't one pitcher out there that conceivably would have been willing to play for a Big 12 program like this one. Like, it's again, I'm a relative softball idiot here. It was very easy to see this team didn't have the pitching necessary to be, a competitive team in the first year in this league. And we're seeing the results. And unfortunately, unlike baseball, where it's like, okay, well, run here, run there, and this team's been kind of unlucky at spots. No, I think 3-9 is probably a fair representation where this team's going to be. And you have lots of very tough series left to go. BYU, Iowa State, those were supposed to be the series that, you kept yourself from being at the bottom of the Big 12 standings by doing well against, and you went 2 of 4 against those teams, and your pitching got absolutely smoked in both those series. So trying not to end on a negative note here, Dustin, but it's just hard. It's hard to end a positive one with this sport right now, unfortunately.
I was going to say, with that 838 conference ERA, surely that means that we don't have 2 absolute, I was going to say 6 games against teams from the state of Oklahoma with monster lineups still to come, right?
Yeah, some bad news in that regard.
Ooh. All right. Well, I think we're going to end up on a more positive note because we're ending with track and field, who had, I think, a really exciting weekend at the Texas Relays this past weekend, and really just a lot of strong performances on both the men's and the women's side. And, you love getting to outdoor season. Houston tends to do a little bit better in outdoor season historically than they do in indoor. And I think there's, some events we haven't really fully seen them, I think, get out of the garage. But this is one of those weekends where you kind of bring out a lot of your big athletes and you put them up against some of the best athletes in the country, because that's who's competing at the Texas Relays every year. And it's just one of those things where a lot of times competing against the best brings out the best in you. And I think that that's what we saw from a lot of Cougar athletes this weekend. I counted six different events where we had an individual or a relay team put up a top 10 mark in the country so far this year at Texas Relays, including I think, and fully 3 of those 6 top 3 in the country. So a lot of really, really exciting performances. You've got 3 on the men's side, 3 on the women's side, among those 6 as well. So not even just solely lumped on one team. So I think really, really all in all, we can talk about some of the individuals here in a bit, Sam, but I think just high level, hard not to see this as a really, really positive weekend for Cougar track and field, both on the men's and the women's side.
Yeah, a lot of high level performances. Like you said, you want to see your team go to an event like the Texas Relays that annually has the very best of the best in outdoor track and field, and have that kind of raise your level of competition. And not to spoil kind of the individual takeaways, but you saw you saw elite level performance from athletes who I think it's fair to say, like, this is early season. Like, you were going to see faster times from, I think, nearly all of the athletes who had the high level performances that you're kind of alluding to.
Yeah, absolutely. To jump in on the men's side, a couple of the his performances you kind of expected. We saw Sean Maswanganyi run a 10.02 100
His
meter
outdoor
dash.
debut. That's absurd.
Yeah, no problem. His first time running outdoors this year. Very nearly breaks 10 seconds. 10.02. That's number 2 in the country so far. Someone we were really excited about as a new addition this year. Didn't quite get over the hump to like real national relevance in the indoor season, but David Ajama, the triple jumper, 52 feet 2 inches in the triple jump. That's number 6 in the country at the moment. And another guy that we expect to do real well, Christian Sampe, cleared 17 feet 8.5 inches in the pole vault. That puts him number 10 in the country as well. So trio of really strong performances kind of headlining for the men, Sam, in addition to some strong performances by the women as well.
Yeah, Kellyanne Beckford setting the U of H record in the 800. That's freaking incredible. Somebody who has basically put herself in the handful of athletes whose performances are always noteworthy. We're always going to probably talk about something Kellyanne Beckford did if we're talking about a Cougar indoor or outdoor meet in the recent past. And this is still by that standard unbelievable. She broke a record that has stood since before I was born. And anyone can see watching, I have white and gray hairs in my beard. That is a record that has stood for a very long time. Also on the women's side, Sydney Townsend finishing second, I believe, with the top collegiate finisher in the women's 400 hurdles as well, currently holding the third fastest time in the nation. Also wanted to highlight a guy on the men's side. Wasn't one of your top performers, but somebody, a really cool story. I didn't know about this until read the recap and kind of dug in on the Cougars of the Texas Relays. But Devontae Burnett, first year Cougar grad transfer from USC, qualified for the 100 finals with Sean Maswanganyi. I think they elected to just have him run in the 4x2 relay on that final day instead of competing in the finals as well. But was a really accomplished sprinter at USC. Has the second fastest time in the 100 in USC's program history, a program that has produced a ton of high-end sprinters. To have the second fastest time, it means you're kind of in rarefied air there. Like U of H, USC is a sprinting program. I know they have, I'm sure, good field athletes and stuff, but a program that's produced a ton of good men's and women's sprinters. On the indoor side, no biggie, ran USC's fastest time in the 60 as the 2022 indoor champion in the event as well. And this year's Texas Relays was Burnett's first meet, Dustin, since the 2022 Pac-12 Outdoor Championships, where he suffered a hamstring injury. Like I said, qualified for the 100 finals that ultimately ended up competing as part of the record-setting 4x2 relay team on the final day. In his first meet in almost 24 months, Dustin ran the 55th fastest time in the nation. That's not bad work when you've been out of competition for that long. And hopefully somebody who by the end of this season is building up to being close to where Maswanganyi is in the national times. And a guy worth watching, kind of to dig past the really high end performances, of which they were plenty. Also want to shout out the women's 4x400 relay as well. Continues their excellence from indoor season. Finished second behind Arkansas. Currently the number 1 time in the country. The 1-2 right now is Arkansas and the Cougs from the Texas Relays. I think tells you what an absurd meet this is year in, year out. Purely vibes-based analysis here, Dustin. But I think this is a really exciting outdoor season, more so maybe than the last few, and that it's really balanced across both the men and women in a number of different events. That's I think what's adding to my excitement, and the earlier turns maybe getting me optimistic for what's to come here in the next month or two.
Yeah, you talked about Burnett coming in the 100 meters. It's exciting for him as an individual athlete as well, but also for Houston's 4x1 relay. Because of course, that for years has been kind of their calling card. Is at one point won a couple of years in a row, won the 4x1 event national championship. That's always been kind of Houston's signature event. The last couple of years they haven't had quite as much sprinting depth. Obviously, you got a real A-list top celebrity in Sean Maswanganyi over the top there, but to add some depth to that sprinting team behind him as well to help out that relay as well. Obviously, very exciting. And then you mentioned, the women's 4x4, which I think was kind of not really on our radar until like right at the end of indoor season, when they had kind of a really kind of out of nowhere huge performance at Big 12 championships. And then they've just absolutely carried that momentum. They had a great performance at NCAA indoors and carrying that forward with, like you said, the current number 2 time in the country that they put up at the Texas Relays this past weekend. So exciting performance all around. And, it's Houston's bellwether program, and it's a program, men's and women's, we've been really hoping to see kind of be on the upswing, and excited by what we saw this past weekend.
Yeah, no doubt. I think, candidly, with men's basketball now done, it's not the easiest to map out how we have weekly content, but boy, this team looks like it's going to in for a really exciting season.
All right. Well, I think we'll go ahead and end on a positive note there on our way out. As always, doing a little bit of housekeeping, letting you know that if you like the Scott and Hood podcast on a regular basis, if you like this, if you like the Skull. Wow, Sam, I am absolutely just.
I'm gonna take a wild guess. You're going for Scott and Holman podcast here, but it's purely a guess on my part.
Warm up my mouth muscles a little bit, see if I remember how to talk. If you like the Scott and Holman podcast, and if you listen to us on a regular basis, and if you feel like you can afford the low price of $5 a month, we would love for you to go to patreon.com/SH podcast. You can sign up to be a patron there. All that support from all of our long time and our short time patrons as well. Very, very much appreciated by us here at the podcast. You can also support us for absolutely free by giving us a 5-star review in your podcast listening app of choice, or subscribing on YouTube if you are looking at Sam and I's beautiful faces at this particular moment. If you want to say hi, you can email us shpodcast@gmail.com, tweet at us at shpodcast, or blue sky us at podcast.bsky.social. That's going to be it for us. Kudos to you if you made it all the way to the end of my rambling nonsense outro. And as always,
go Cougs.